Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
Well, welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yep.
All right, man. Well, it's winding down. We're heading into the final stretch. I would say you're starting to see things take shape in the Western Conference, but it's just as muddled as it's ever been. I think you've got teams jockeying for advantageous positions, seeing teams lose games that you wouldn't expect them to drop, some teams dealing with injuries. The East is interesting. You got some teams like the Pacers who are really making a push and playing really well. Got the Knicks dealing with injuries. So I was thinking that heading into this final stretch, it might be interesting for you and I to just do a back and forth, your turn, my turn type format where we talk about the 5 most important things, the 5 most interesting things to watch as this NBA season winds down and we gear up for the playoffs. What do you think about that?
I think it makes total sense. We're at the part of the NBA, my favorite part, where half the league is desperately trying to become as good as possible and gear up for the playoffs. The other half of the league is trying everything they can to field 5 Killian Hayes and lose as many games as possible. So, the dichotomy is fantastic. Especially,
you got some teams that are so bad they can't even do that, like the Brooklyn Nets. They seem to fight every time. It's a tough out for a lot of teams.
They have mastered the art of failing to be bad. It's like the NBA player who tries to miss the free throw and manages to swish it.
You got other teams out there that are fielding players like Zion and still losing by 40 to the Pistons.
Yeah. You got that. You got teams like the Mavericks, which are unable to apparently field full rosters because
we might actually be looking at some forfeits.
They've truly mastered the ability to blow up a team.
Worst trade deadline in any sport in the history of team sports.
I think we're up there. They had 2 nuclear level bad trades, not just the Luka one, but then the Quentin Grimes one, where they traded Quentin Grimes, who's averaging 25, 5 and 5 on 50% shooting now for the Sixers, for Caleb Martin, who's averaging less than 5 points a game, and another trade where they traded the better younger player for the worse older player who has a bigger contract.
Do you think that the Dallas Mavericks will make the championship games?
I don't think they'll make the championship games.
For those of y'all listening and don't know what we're talking about, Patrick Dumont, world-class basketball connoisseur, aficionado, who is a historian of the game, also one of the masterminds behind the Luka trade for the Dallas Mavericks, recently said that the trade for Luka was about reaching the championship games. His mind was obviously caught up in ping pong or some other sport.
I agree. I don't think that they're going to be medalists or be on the podium. For the NBA championship games, but no, we're definitely in the twilight zone of the NBA season where everything kind of we're kind of just running through this for show. We're looking for things to talk about. But I think that what you just laid out would be a great idea.
All right, you want to start? What's your number one most interesting thing?
My number one most interesting thing is are the Lakers and the Warriors, the 2 teams in the West who upgraded at the trade deadline, the 2 best teams in the West? This question made a lot more sense right before the Warriors lost to the Nuggets without all their best players, but they've both those teams have been rejuvenated by their major additions, and obviously the adding Luka is going to rejuvenate any team. But I think, what we've seen from them has been honestly both teams' ability to use the sort of wing additions to their team to create swarming defenses that have powered their offense and generated easy looks. And, we've talked about in both cases, and I think that we've talked at length about the Lakers and the podcast, but the Warriors with, adding Jimmy Butler gave him a legitimate second option, but it also stabilized. I think it helped click reset on the team that had been toxic ever since Draymond punched Jordan Poole and had been unable to avoid spiraling. Every season after that, they would just spiral. as they would go, once they would go forward, and things would be rough.
I think you saw after that trade, like some of the comments coming out of Golden State about from Steph and Draymond really did see Jimmy Butler as like, all right, man, this is our last chance.
Yep.
Like this is the platform from which we will be able to launch whatever our last chances are at really competing for an NBA title, and we've got to maximize this opportunity. And so I think it most certainly refocused sort of the core guys. I think a lot of the peripheral players on that team were always going to follow them too anyway.
Yeah.
Those two guys are the leaders of that team. They're going to set the tone. They're going to determine what the culture is. And I think once they reset and their focus was single-pointedly back on winning an NBA championship, you saw them elevate their level of play. But then the thing about Jimmy Butler that I think fits so nicely. Like there's all the basketball stuff that's just obvious. Like, Jimmy Butler's ability to play off ball, to play with the ball in his hands, to cut, to get to the rim, to play without the ball. Like honestly, maybe the only player in the league who does that better than him is Steph. So, and Draymond, his ability to kind of play like a point forward, point center position, almost like a Sabonis, and distribute the ball from that hub. I think, pairs very well, not just with Steph, obviously, but with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy is a really high IQ glue guy who, when you plug him into a situation like they have in Golden State, can really allow the world to sort of orbit around Steph. But if it's a night where Steph doesn't have it going and you need more for Jimmy Butler, or you're in those non-Steph minutes, Jimmy Butler's really able to step up and give you what you need on the offensive end. And then he's a really good defender who brings a level of intensity. And if Jimmy Butler is going to be true to form, you might even see him step this up a little bit in the playoffs, and you get that intensity ratcheted up a bit. And I think one of the things to watch with them heading into the playoffs is Draymond and Jimmy Butler are two of the best in the league at mucking up a game.
Yes.
And I think, for example, if they were to find themselves paired up against a young, inexperienced team like OKC, their ability to do that and make it a nasty, ugly game could be the difference in that series.
I agree. I also think that one of the parts that Golden State had been missing ever since Klay Thompson's injury was that they did not have a legitimate second option scorer. This was a team that was fully reliant on Steph to generate not only offense for himself but for others. And Steph was the only player on the team who was able to get to the line. No one else, even Andrew Wiggins, who's been playing very, very well this year. Teams would just let him, they weren't going to foul him. They were going to let him, they let him attack, and they were going to basically play prevent defense. And if he scored, but they weren't going to let that throw off their defensive coverage. And so you saw a lot of games where it kind of looked like flag football, where you had Steph Curry running around with the ball and four dudes just chasing him as he chasing around because they didn't fear anyone else. Jimmy Butler not only provides a legitimate second option, he is at this point basically his offense, almost 50% of it comes from the line during games. He just tries to go there as much. Yeah. That gives an older team a chance to get a breather mid game. It slows. It gets the opponent.
Huge deal for Steph. His ability to get to the free throw line and give Steph a breather standing at midcourt or extend the amount of time he's sitting on the bench in real time. Huge deal for Steph and the Warriors.
Yep. It slows down opposing runs. The Warriors were a team where you would see games where they'd be competitive, suddenly get out of hand because they would go cold. And the other team would when they go cold, they're shooting threes. So they're creating fast break opportunities for the opposing side if they're breaking a lot. That's that's one of the under-discussed things about teams that have high volume of 3-point shots is it's not only that you can go cold and not score for 5-minute stretches. It's that they're going to get long rebounds. They're going to allow the opposing team to get into transition more easily. And the Warriors would often give up these large runs during games and suddenly find themselves way behind the 8 ball. And Butler's ability to grind the game to a halt, to stop it, his ability to offer a change of pace. He's not going to shoot a lot of threes. He's gonna attack the rim. Really has fundamentally transformed the entire style of play for this team. This is not the traditional what we've seen, like the Steve Kerr style offense. This is one that I think is far more balanced, far more efficient, and one that I think is going to be a lot more effective in a playoff atmosphere too.
Well, on the same note, with you saying that Jimmy Butler sort of resituated the balance of the Golden State Warriors, I think a similar thing happened in LA. It's obvious that anytime you add Luka Doncic to a team, you're going to shift the balance of that team. I mean, you have a player whose gravitational center is so strong that he can catch a pass and without dribbling stand in triple threat, and you already see the defense begin to shift. Once he puts the ball on the ground and starts to attack, the entire defense becomes compromised, and he's able to get outstanding looks for his teammates from three. And it's noticeable. Like, their three-point percentage has gone up since Luka Doncic joined the team because the looks his teammates are getting are significantly better. All of that goes without saying. I think anybody except for Nico Harrison could have predicted that was going to happen. The thing that I think some people have talked about, but it's much more important, is what the addition of Luka Doncic has meant for LeBron James. LeBron James has had to be the predominant offensive engine for the Los Angeles Lakers, the on-ball offensive engine for the Los Angeles Lakers for years now. Anthony Davis has never been able to take the reins from him. And even though Austin Reeves has increased his ball handling responsibilities and playmaking responsibilities and done very well with that, it's still the ultimate responsibility in a pinch fell back to LeBron James. What having Luka Doncic on that team has done for LeBron has enabled LeBron to play off ball more, to not have to work as hard to generate his offense, to work against more compromised defenses, to get more clean open looks from three. And then in addition to that, when the ball does come to LeBron, once Luka attacks, kicks the ball out to LeBron, and this is also true of Austin Reeves, and they're attacking compromised defenses, even if the defense shifts to deal with them attacking a closeout, you have two elite playmakers still on ball and creating for their teammates. And so all of that has made LA's offense much more potent. But more importantly, what I think it's done is it's enabled LeBron James to reinvest some of his energy in defense. And you've seen a noticeable improvement in the Lakers' defense. Honestly, I think LeBron James is a significantly more potent offensive weapon with the ball in his hands than Jimmy Butler. But I think that if you're looking for like a player comp for the style of play that LeBron has adjusted to since Luka Doncic has come to LA, he is I think he's a more potent version, but I think he is a version of Jimmy Butler. He is a two-way player who's playing off ball and creating for others.
No, I mean, I would 100% agree on that. And in fact, like they share some similarities in how they attack the rim, and
both high IQ.
High IQ. They're playing the secondary playmaker role. Look, the difference between this is at this point in his career, Luka is a better playmaker than LeBron is. He's just a superior player overall. So you've now, you've taken burden off LeBron. You've optimized the offense further. You've allowed LeBron to suddenly be defended by, the second best defender on the team, perimeter defender.
And to that point, it's not just second best defender, because a lot of the times, like, let's say you brought, take San Antonio, for example. You bring in a player like De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
That doesn't change who on the opposing team is going to guard Wemby, because you're just talking about two fundamentally different players who are so different in size that it's a different category of defender that's guarding them. That's not true with LeBron and Luka.
No, it's two huge
Talking
wings.
about two 6'7", 6'8", 240, 250, 55-pound ball handling, playmaking scorers. Like they're very similar players. They play at a different pace, but they're very similar players.
Yes, and the different pace also, like, honestly, Luka's pace he plays at, this much slower pace than LeBron has historically played at, it's probably also helping LeBron too. The one of the reducing the burden on your 40-year-old is going to add benefits as long as it doesn't affect offensive production, to be very clear. He's going to have long-term benefits, short-term benefits, everything. It allows him to reinvest more energy on defense. It allows him to be more efficient in game as well. One of the things you saw this season early on was that LeBron in a lot of games was having to put in so much energy that in the fourth quarter his legs would be shot, and you would see him front rimming a lot of shots. And you also saw him wear down at one point early in the season when he was trying to play all 82 games, and they had to give him sort of a rest break. This is not a criticism, to be very clear. He's 40 years old. This is just what happens when you have a 40-year-old. And Luka is he not only is he facing usually the inferior wing defender. He's facing the inferior wing defender who's having to scramble to close out on LeBron because they have to help off of Luka. So he's facing somebody who's not an optimal defensive position. He's not in a 3-point stance in a lot of cases. Like they're running out to LeBron, who can just pump fake and go by him or take him off the dribble. They have they have optimized the defensive scheme which the Lakers have bought into. The players have bought into where they are swarming and playing aggressive and physical. They give up a lot of 3-pointers, but like that. That's the it truly. Like I do believe that Redick is correct. This is the best defensive scheme and it's produced really good results so far. This went from a team that had a very clear ceiling before. Like the Lakers were the Lakers had, with the after the title winning, they won the title in 2021, I believe was the year. There was or 2020. They have had a clear ceiling since then with the personnel around AD and LeBron, which was that if they were a physically larger and more dominant team than you, they were pretty much unbeatable in the series. If they could bully you, they were going to win. But against teams which were able to physically match up with them, they historically struggled. That was one of the major reasons why Denver specifically had their number for a couple of playoffs in a row.
Absolutely.
And adding Luka has changed the dynamic. They are, we've talked about this about there's a lot of talk in the media about, oh, they're small. They're not small. They're small at the 5. But they are huge, 1 through 4. They're enormous 1 through 4.
Yeah.
Like they field 3 players.
I wouldn't be surprised in terms of like average height with their starting 5 if they're not actually one of the bigger teams in the league. I mean,
they have an 8. This is a team that matches up physically with the teams from the 80s, where like you would have Parrish, Mikhail Bird all on the court at the same time, and like that's the size we're talking about. And they're a team that's going to create mismatches against pretty much everyone. Like one of the things that would be really, really fun about specifically Golden State versus LA matchup is that both of those teams have big wings. They have depth at the wing position as well. And they're veteran teams that have histories of long histories of playing against each other. But I would argue, going back to our main point, I think these are the 2 teams that are best suited for long playoff runs in the West right now. I'm not saying they're the best teams. I think that Golden State, for example, could be. I think the Jokic could present a unique matchup problem for them, just because I'm not really sure Quentin Post is someone I want to put up 48 minutes a game versus them. But the reality is, there's not a lot of teams right now that can just punish them super aggressively, and they can match up. They have versatility through 1 through 5 elsewhere. Yeah,
they both have 2 very clear flaws to me. One, with Golden State, they don't have a lot of versatility in terms of playing like larger teams. It's going to be whether or not like a spunky muck it up type defense can neutralize a threat against an elite big, and whether or not on the offensive end you can just outshoot them. The Lakers, to me, really the fundamental problem that the Lakers face is depth at certain positions. I think that ideally the Lakers would definitely want to have LeBron, Luka, and Reeves healthy. I actually think they could, lose Reeves, and that would certainly present challenges. I just don't think that those challenges would be insurmountable because of how much scoring and playmaking you can get from Luka and LeBron. To
No,
me,
they can scrounge 70 points from those two,
yeah.
and like that, I'm happy to trust Rui Hachimura,
To
Dorian
me, to
Finney-Smith,
me, where they
Hayes
can't
too.
afford to lose anything, like the one player, if they went down, I don't see how they compensate for it.
Jordan
Is,
Goodwin.
is Jackson Hayes
Yeah. No, yeah. I agree, and it's
for
not
for two reasons.
yeah.
You've got to have the vertical spacing with Luka.
Yes.
If you don't have the vertical spacing with Luka, you take the lob threat away on his drive, which makes his deceleration move less potent. It's easier to stop him from scoring in the paint, forces him to take tougher shots. And quite honestly, if you're a Lakers fan, you might be saying, like, well, we got Koloko. You don't, you do, but who cares? He
Ben's
doesn't.
like, he doesn't actually exist. You have to understand that. This is not a real person. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Luke. I mean, it's just been shown too many times. Like Luca gets going downhill and throws the lob to Koloku, and he does the ball's virtually to the rim before he realizes that was never a shot. There's too many passes he's just not ready for.
Yeah. I agree with that.
He's not a legitimate threat in the middle. But like you need LeBron, you need Luca, you need Rui Hachimura, you need Jackson Hayes, you need Vanderbilt, you need Dorian Finney-Smith, and there's just not a lot. And quite honestly, I think in a matchup against Golden State, you're going to need Goodwin and you're going to need Gabe Vincent. You're going to need two guys who can chase Steph around on the court.
No, they desperately need that because the one weakness their defense, the one time it's consistently fallen apart for them this year, where teams have consistently gotten good looks, is when they've faced teams whose point guard or can break down Austin Reeves off the dribble. Like those teams have consistently been able to generate good shots against them. And they've been able to win some of those games, to be very clear, because the Lakers are hyper efficient on offense. But Austin Reeves is very clearly the weak link on
But
that defense.
you also don't want Austin Reeves guarding Steph Curry. I mean, if you remember when the Lakers met Golden State in the playoffs, I think it was 2 years ago, and they won. Yeah, it was the year that they went to the Western Conference Finals. Austin Reeves struggled in that series. He had some big shots, he had some big moments, but part of the reason he struggled in that series was he didn't have any legs.
Yeah.
Because you had him chasing Steph around the whole damn game. Like, you would much rather that be Goodwin or Gabe Vincent than Austin Reeves.
Yeah.
They're better defenders, and you're not as worried about their offensive production.
Yeah, and to that point, for why this edition of Butler is so important for the Warriors, one of the things that the Warriors did not have in that series was if they couldn't generate a switch to get Reeves on to Curry, there was no one on that team who could exploit Reeves off the dribble. Basically, at that time, they really did not have anyone in that series. Now they can. Now they have Butler. So like if you scheme your defense to basically try to hide Reeves from Curry, the Warriors could just get him onto Butler, and Butler will really like that's a really bad matchup. Like because Butler's not only is he going to like just drive through Reeves, he's gonna generate fouls, he's gonna get him, he's gonna bully him physically. Like that allows him to exploit that weakness much more than they could in the past. Which because before a lot of times what the Warriors would face was sort of like gimmicky zones, which were basically like designed to basically limit the effectiveness of Steph Curry running circles around the court to try to generate open shots and limit his ability to basically get to the hoop. Because I think that's if you could limit him getting to the hoop, the Warriors were just basically kind of a stationary team that was forced to take long threes. But I think it would be very interesting. I do think that right now the team in the West, setting aside the Thunder, who have been consistent at a very high level throughout the season, and but who you and I both think have weaknesses that can be exposed in a playoff setting. I think the Lakers are the team that is most interesting to me in terms of their ability to overperform expectations.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that I don't disagree with you that Austin Reeves, if you can ISO Luka in perimeter defense, like those are two guys that people can beat off the dribble. I think one of the things you've seen with the Lakers defense is that they've also shifted more towards the Maverick style of defense last year that isn't really about preventing blow-bys. It's about funneling the player to a shot blocker in the middle. I don't think that Jackson Hayes is the shot blocker that Lively or Gafford were last year, but he has a long athletic presence in the middle. I think.
Well, they're not funneling to the same place. The Mavs funneled you to the hoop. The Lakers are funneling you basically to the free throw line, the bottom circle of the free throw line, the one that's dashed.
Where you're going to run into Rui and LeBron.
You're going to run into four guys. That's what that's what they're funneling, because they realize, no, if you try to funnel a player to this Lakers team at the hoop, it's going to be really bad. And so what they're trying to do is funnel you into traffic and hope that they can cause enough chaos to generate a steal and use the fact that you're going to be running into three guys who are 250. Just to be quite honest.
But I think that the Lakers are more capable of masking their weaknesses than the Warriors are. I also think that the Lakers just have way more upside with LeBron, Austin Reeves, and Luka on the court at the same time. Honestly, I think that in terms of trios in the league, that's got to be one of, if not the most potent offensive trio in the league. And I don't even think you've seen, to be honest with you, I think a LeBron Luka pick and roll is something that's going to be really difficult for teams to deal with. I think a Horns action is going to be really difficult with all three of them involved in it. And they're just not really doing that a lot. I think there's a lot of stuff that they haven't, unpacked yet that you'll see in the playoffs. But shifting gears, so your first one is the way that the big moves at the trade deadline will play out in the playoffs, particularly with Luka and Jimmy Butler. I'm going to go in a different direction. And I'm going to pick a team that's more or less, really not done anything to change who they are, with the exception of the addition of Russell Westbrook in a hot minute. And I'm going to talk about the Nuggets. And it may be a bad
pick it right here right now.
It may be a bad pick for me, because it's very difficult to say anything coherent about this team. I don't know what the hell they are, to be quite honest with you. But I think that doesn't bode well for a team on the, heading into the playoffs to not really know what the hell they are. To me, the big thing that I would say about anyone's evaluation of the Nuggets, it's not even an X's and O's thing, it's a perception thing, is a lot of the way that people feel about the Nuggets is based off of that 10-game streak they had. I think it was heading into the All-Star break. And the truth is if you go back and you look at the scheduling during that 10-game streak, they were playing teams like Charlotte, Portland, I talking to you earlier, I don't think it was the Wizards, because I think the Wizards strangely have the Nuggets number this year. But they were playing
beat LSU in that streak as well.
They were running they were running through a really, really, really weak point in the schedule. And it was very low-level basketball analysis that was arriving at the conclusion that this team is really back during that stretch. And I think that they can be a good team. But I think that stretch has inflated the perception a lot of people have of the Nuggets. And really, when you look at them against good teams, they haven't fared that well.
No, I think a lot of the analysis of the Nuggets circles the drain around the fact that this is a team that currently is playing worse than the sum of its parts. And what I mean by that is you'll see nights like last night where Jokic, Murray, and Braun all miss, and you're like, this is a team that's going to be screwed. and then you get larger, more prominent roles for MPJ and specifically Aaron Gordon, and they show out. They show out. But when they're all together, you rarely, if ever, this season see all like their top 5 players play well together simultaneously. They are continuously running into a situation where when they are healthy, they're really good. When Jokic plays, they have about a 70% win percentage. But when you watch the games, what you see is that it's Jokic and spin the wheel,
Yeah,
whoever's going to play
100%.
well that night. And part of the issue with this is that they do not have any bench. This is one of the worst constructed benches in NBA history for a contender. They don't have any bench. The
Let me
players.
ask you this: do you consider them a contender?
I do because that's just because Jokic and the only reason I say that I don't consider him a top tier contender to be very clear, but I do think that Jokic can win 4 games in a series, against pretty much anyone. I trust him to do that. I don't think it's likely, but I'm not going to discount the possibility if that makes sense. But I don't my bigger issue with them right now is if I'm ranking them in the West, I think that you are asking, I've never seen a team win the title that I can remember where you have had only one player play at an elite level and everyone else relatively underperform what their peak is. Like no one else on the Nuggets right now, aside from maybe Christian Braun, is playing at the top of their level besides Jokic. There's no player on the roster is doing that of consequence. I will add, and the result of that is usually that those type of teams tend to just they'll get one round deep and then they'll get beaten. And Murray is putting up decent stats, but if you watch the tape, he doesn't get to the rim nearly as often. Gordon, you say, oh, he's lost a step, and then you watch games like last night where he's utterly dominant, and it's like, well, something he's clearly not being utilized. Like when they're playing their full strength team, you're not maximizing what you're getting from him. MPJ, I get the same feeling over and over again. I don't feel like they have that the offensive system they're running maximizes the utility of him, and that it's not like Jokic is getting him good shots. Jokic is these players are getting good shots. I think that what is happening there is that stuff has run a little stale, and I do wonder if it's time for there to be a change at the coaching ranks as well as in the front office because they just you can't.
I think the front office
Yeah.
there needs to be change. I do think, although it seemed very much like this decision was driven more by Jokic than anyone, but the front office did make a good move in picking up Westbrook. Westbrook has been good.
He's been for what they got him at a minimum contract. He's been one of the best minimums in the league. This team, Westbrook can honestly argue that the Nuggets would be lost without him.
I agree. I agree completely.
He has been outside of Jokic the most consistent player in the Nuggets all year. He is invaluable to the team. And one of the things more so than anything else is he's out along with Jokic, he's consistently high effort. This is not a team when I watch them that consistently puts out the highest effort in a lot of the positions. You cannot say that about Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray clearly came into the season out of shape. You want to talk about Luka all you want. Jamal Murray was significantly more out of shape than Luka was. Jamal Murray at the beginning of the year looked like he had lost his ability to play basketball. Like he looked, and Gordon.
And to be clear, in the beginning of the year, we're referring to the first 25 games.
Seasons. Yeah. And this is there's something just amiss. It's that the team's not working. And there's other teams in the league like this, but I say they're a contender, but I'm not putting any I don't bet. But
Yeah, I'm at the point where I'm not willing to call them a contender. I mean, I don't think they're an easy out in a playoff series. I think that there are teams I think Jokic could give problems to a team like OKC. I think
Jokic is giving problems to everyone.
To everyone, yeah. But I'm talking about like I could see just because of the girth and strength element, like Jokic giving insurmountable problems to a team like OKC.
I mean, he went 15 for like 20 in one game against them like a couple weeks ago. Like, yeah.
So I don't think you can consider them an easy out just because of him. And I certainly believe they can win a playoff series. I just have a hard time seeing them win 3 playoff series.
I completely agree with that. And I think the better way for me to phrase this is, do I think that they have a legitimate chance to win the title? No. Do I think they can knock off anyone in the West in a series?
I agree with that.
100%.
I agree with that.
And I'll go back to this, and this is reductive, but the teams that you see playing at the highest level are oftentimes a team that look like they're legitimately having fun out there. And the Nuggets they don't look like despondent. They're not the Phoenix Suns who look actively grumpy and actively they look like a bunch of Eeyores from Winnie the Pooh. Out there like, oh, this is basketball, great. And the Nuggets aren't jovial, to put it that way. Like this is it looks like there's something missing, and like a little bit of that joy of they had 2 years ago has been zapped, and I think stuff needs to be shaken up a little bit to get that back. That like you saw with the Lakers, just the trade of Luka revitalized that locker room. Like it's not just that they added a better player; it's that team is now clearly having fun, and you saw what that did to their investment in defense and their buy-in to the program. Like like that, and so there needs to be some some shakeup because
I think to your point, it's not just the Luka trade. It's JJ Redick. Like one of the things about JJ Redick, I think you can see imprinted on this team. And the Nuggets game against the Lakers was a good example of this. When you've got a coach who's that bought in, who's that fired up and ready to go, that he's talking about, I couldn't sleep for 2 nights thinking about a game plan for Jokic and all this stuff. Like it's one of those things to me that that like you see that's contagious, and that starts to spread through that locker room, and those guys take the court with the same type of enthusiasm.
No, I agree, and I was listening to Jovan Buha, who's the athletic reporter for the Lakers, and one of the things he pointed out in a recent interview is Redick has done some masterful scheming, but he's also connected personally with the players on a level that Darvin Ham did not do, and the result of that is some of the Lakers' defensive scheme this year, especially since the AD trade, has been things that Darvin Ham was trying to put in place as well. Mainly that like we're going to give up 3-pointers, but we're going to focus on basically cutting off attacks to the rim. And the Lakers team chafed it at that point, partly because their relationship with Ham was so frosty, and the players had sort of zoned out, tuned him out. And Redick has done a much better job getting players to buy in to some similar elements of a system that they were resistant to last year, and that is the sign of a good high-level manager. Like there's a part of a coaching job which is just manager. Like there's only a certain amount of things in basketball like that you can do, and you need like to be successful. You can run the perfect offense if your players aren't buying into it. They're not like that. It's not going to work. He has gotten that team to believe, and he should absolutely be lauded for that. He's done a fantastic job.
Yeah. So what's your next thing for us to watch heading into the playoffs?
What do we do with the East outside of? I mean, like my major question is like, what do we do with the East outside of Cleveland and Boston? Like it's complete chaos outside of that. And I mean, we have, you have New York, who I keep on waiting to show me something that makes me believe they're a contender, because I believe that they have a 7-man roster that can be competitive in any playoff series. But they never seem to be able to put it together. They never seem to be able to put together 48 minutes against a top-level team. I believe they're like 0-9 or like 0-12 or something like that against the top teams. You have Indiana, which apparently if you let them take fading out of bounds sideways 3-pointers, they will beat you every time. But they are another team that you just like. I guess you don't consistently see top level ball from them. They're sort of erratic. And like my major question here, Orlando. I was super high on Orlando. They can't
Yeah.
like right now. Duke is running a higher level offense than they are, and they're it just seems like, is there anyone in the East that has a chance to make some noise outside of Boston and Cleveland in your mind?
I think when you look at the East, Cleveland and Boston have separated themselves from everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
The Knicks
Cleveland's
have,
low key on a 70-win pace right now. Like people
yeah,
aren't talking about it. Like they're
yeah, yeah. Cleveland and Boston have separated themselves from everyone else. The Knicks have separated themselves from the rest of the field. And then
yeah.
you just have this bunch with the Bucks, Pacers, Pistons. I guess you could say Hawks and Magic. I think that I would lump Bucks, Pacers, Pistons together. Like that's the
Yeah.
next group.
Yeah.
Um,
By the way, quick note: do you know who coaches the Detroit Pistons? Do you know more about
yes,
basketball than Shaq? Yes.
I do. I do know who coaches the Pistons. Um, the the thing that's interesting to me about that bunch of teams, I'm not willing to sell on the Knicks yet. I don't think they're better than Cleveland or Boston. I think they're a gritty team who will fight and can muck up a series and play you really physical and make things interesting. I have more confidence, and I don't know why, that they could get into a series with Cleveland and potentially muck it up and win that. Now, when I say potentially win that, I'm talking about like a 10 to 15% chance. I'm certainly favoring
I would
Cleveland.
absolutely give them 15% chance against Cleveland. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
overwhelmingly favor Cleveland though.
yeah.
Once you get past them and you start talking about the Bucks, Pacers, and Pistons, the team I like the most of that bunch, maybe the Pistons. Um, because
They have energy. They look
well,
fun.
they're
Yeah,
ascending. Like
yeah.
that's the thing. Like they're getting better. I also feel that way about the Pacers. The Pacers are better than they were earlier in the season. That's largely dependent upon Halliburton being better than he was earlier in the season.
He
Um,
started taking 2-point shots again. No, I mean, yeah, he's like it. He's playing at a high level again. At the beginning of the year, it was his weird basketball. Like he
well,
would
if
take
I'm
like
not mistaken, he did that last year too.
he had a really good beginning of last year, then came back from injury and had a poor second half. But like he's now playing at an elite level. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I like the Pacers and the Pistons, more than the Bucks, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think the Bucks and the Bucks have all the hallmarks of a team that is past its prime.
Yeah.
A once great team who has seen better days, and they have an elite dominant art, like probably like if you need a basket, the most dominant player in the world. Like you just need one basket right now, and like if you want someone to go one on one, Giannis is going to score, pretty much every time. But the the rest of the team is old in terms of Dame Lillard. You have players being asked to do more than they are capable of with regards to like Kyle Kuzma's played well, but they're asking him to be like a legit borderline all-star level player for this system to work. You have, other players who probably should have smaller roles that are still playing 30 minutes a game, and Brooke Lopez, who's like 38 years old at this point. And they also, outside of Giannis, this is a continuous problem they've had for now 2 years, ever since Drew Holiday left. They have no high level athleticism, like on the roster. Besides that, from who they play out, Kevin Porter Jr. maybe, but like he's not like going out there and like you know dunking on you. He's more just like he's crafty and like that. And
Yeah.
I don't really also know how much value you're getting out of your backup point guards. Athleticism. Put it that way.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
he was a good addition, but he's
Yeah.
not changing anything.
Yeah, and if you're
The
relying on
problem
Kevin
I
Porter
even
Jr. to
have
win, Yeah, good luck,
Yeah.
buddy. Yeah.
The problem I even have with Giannis in this situation, and I think you saw it in the Oklahoma City game, where it's just sort of like whoever's guarding Giannis out on the perimeter, do your best.
Yeah.
Like, just try to stay in front of him as long as you can. But, take away the mid-range shot,
Yeah.
and we're going to have the paint packed
Yeah.
to prevent him from scoring at the rim. He may
Yeah.
end up on the foul line. We'll live with Giannis on the foul line. And I think that when you surround Giannis with people who aren't significant threats, the problem becomes just overly relying on Giannis to get you a bucket becomes too easy to defend.
No, this is a team that, like, if you'd added Jimmy Butler to this team, now we're interesting. Now like we got that now that's interesting. But like, instead they added Cal Kuzma, and like, not to be mean to Kuzma, but like, well, I'm going to be mean to Kuzma. I watched the Washington Wizards religiously, and before the trade deadline was the worst team of professional basketball team I've ever seen. Like that, uniquely bad in terms of just like effort and in terms of like chemistry. Like Jordan Poole was clearly one of the people on the team who was like, guys, we got to play more seriously.
Yeah.
And that's not been Jordan Poole's calling card through his career. And since then, when they added Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton, they're now 6-4, and they play hard every night. And like the one player they removed from that team was Kyle Kuzma. So like I think that you saw that there were some issues there. He's played well in Milwaukee. I think he's bought in. I think he had the classic checked out player syndrome where he just didn't think it was competitive, so he wasn't going to try it. But they're missing a second option. Like this, you add in a second option to this team, then this looks very interesting. But they don't have the assets to get one without giving up a major piece of their roster. So like I think this team right now is, unless they can pull off, they were the Lakers were before the Luka trade. Unless you can pull off like the trade of the century, you're kind of stuck where you are. Now Lakers pull off the trade of the century.
Yeah.
So and so like that changes things. But there's I do believe that the Nico Harrisons are a finite resource, and I think you probably exhausted that for the next little bit in terms of
100%. Like you don't very often see trades where Shams doing interviews on podcast after just recounting what it was like to send out the tweet, and he says my hand was trembling. Like sounds more like he's texting someone asking them to marry him. But yeah, I think you're probably looking at a 4-5 game between the Pacers and the Bucks. I think there's a chance the Pistons could wiggle into that game, but I think it's more likely to be the Bucks and the Pacers. I think the Bucks can beat the Pacers. I think that would be a good series, assuming everyone's healthy. And I think they actually contrast well with each other. Their styles contrast well. I like I said, I like the Pistons of that bunch. I think that's just more of an aesthetic thing. I like how feisty they are. I like how hard they're playing. I like the story. I like Cade Cunningham. And I think you got to remember too, that team doesn't have Jaden Ivey on it right now. Like that team next year is going to be, really, 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 really interesting. But to me,
as long as Isaiah Stewart doesn't eat someone by accident during a game,
To me, the Eastern Conference is tiered in a way the Western Conference is not. The Western Conference, like the Thunder's clearly at the top.
Yeah.
And everybody else is just like in the dryer and tumbler mode, just circling around the 2 through 5 slots.
There's like a Mexican standoff happening with the rest of them where everyone can beat one of the like 5 player teams jumbled together, but they can also lose to another one of them. So it's really gonna how the standings settle out, play out is really gonna determine.
But the top 3 in the East, I think, are settled.
I agree, and part of this to me, well, there's 2 things. One, I think the Sixers implosion, I think, kind of rattled some stuff up. There should be like that team should have been better than it was. It had. And just it never meant to be, and like they're probably screwed.
Paul George is out for the year now,
but he ended his podcast, so now they can focus on winning the title. But there has been some disappointing teams, in the East this year. To me, Orlando. I was incredibly high on them, and at the beginning of the year, they played at an extremely high level, even when they had injuries. Like I don't if you go back to our early season episodes, you will see us, fairly applauding the Magic for surviving without Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner. And
And
then,
starting the year with Paulo Banchero looking like he was going to be all NBA first team level.
yeah. And then once they got pretty much all their players back, they have been worse than they were when they were missing their best players. And this is a team that would struggle to score enough points to win consistently in the the heyday of the low scoring NBA in like the late 90s, early 2000s. They consistently score 80 to 78 to like 92 points a game. And it they are uninteresting to watch visually. They are they seem to be like more frustrated than they are trying to
Well,
win.
I think with the Magic too, you've seen a team that's kind of like, I don't think anybody would have thought this at the beginning of the year, but I think you can make a strong argument for it now that sort of the heart and soul or the glue of that team was Jalen Suggs.
I think it's unquestionable at this point.
I mean, you go back to that signing of Jalen Suggs, one of the best signings, in the NBA in recent years. I think it's kind of up there with that Jalen Brunson type signing. I don't think Suggs is going to have the same level of impact in the league that Brunson does, but for your team and for what you got him for, I think that the Orlando Magic made a really, really, really good decision there. And I think without Jalen Suggs, you see that this team's ceiling is much lower.
And just to put a cap on this, because I don't want to like make this into too long of an extended bash session on the Magic, but Banchero needs to come back next year and show that he can be an efficient player. He has all the talent in the world to be a elite Hall of Fame level scorer, like in terms of just body, skill, height, everything, just like feel for the game. Right now, he is wildly inefficient given the natural talents and skills that he has. And he needs to be a player that is averaging, scoring at over 50% a game, clip. He needs to have a high, true shooting efficiency. He does not have that. He also needs to be able to get his teammates involved. Right now, he exists outside of the offense, and there's no flow to the Magic. They need him better next year.
You could say the same thing for Franz Wagner too.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. My next pick. You said it a minute ago. It's not really something to watch for the rest of the year. It is something interesting to talk about, though. It's more of a retrospective on up until this point. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the 76ers. Who's had a worst season, the 76ers or the Dallas Mavericks? I'm going to say that it's the Dallas Mavericks for this reason. You and I relished every moment of the Olympics in Paris.
Oh, it was one of the best basketball tournaments ever put together.
Yes, loved it and loved every minute of it. Loved the Netflix Court of Gold. The only negative thing you and I consistently talked about with Team USA was Joel Embiid. And how he looked to be late. Even when he played well and had an impact, he looked like he was laboring.
Like he couldn't move his legs, which...
Yeah. And so going into this season, there was conversation about whether or not Joel Embiid was going to be healthy. There was conversation about whether or not we would ever see a healthy Joel Embiid again. I know they signed Paul George. I know that they had Tyrese Maxey coming back. I know what the expectation level was in Philadelphia. I also think that a lot of that was set by the media just fawning over superstar moves and stuff like that. And I thought it was a little overhyped to begin with. Never thought they were better than Philly. Never thought they were better than Boston. Never thought they were better than New York. And so I think there was at least enough questions about the health of Joel Embiid going into this season that it didn't feel like it came out of nowhere, right? Mm-hmm. When you flip over and you look at the Dallas Mavericks, you're talking about a team who went to the NBA Finals last year, had arguably the best player in the league last year, won the scoring title, finished third in the MVP, almost averaged a triple-double along with winning the scoring title. First player in NBA history to ever lead the playoffs in scoring, rebounds, assists, and steals. It just felt like the Mavericks, literally apart from the Celtics, they were on top of the world. And then you looked at the deficiencies they had in the Celtics series, and they went out and tried to address them. They brought in Klay Thompson to bolster their perimeter shooting, right? Gafford and Lively were going to continue to be the twin-headed monster in the middle. You brought in Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall. Omax Prosper was developing. You felt good if you were a Mavericks fan with Luka and Kyrie at the helm. And then there was just one night where Shams Charania picked up his phone and shit all over your world if you were a Mavericks fan and told you that Luka had been traded. And I feel like that came so far out of left field that the sheer shock of it has to make what has become of the Dallas Mavericks, which is now a team that has no postseason aspirations whatsoever. Currently, the level of expectation is so low that the aspiration is just to be able to have enough guys healthy for the next game to not forfeit. All right. And so I have to give.
It doesn't even qualify as aspiration. Like, you basically, their aspiration is that we show up to work. Like, that's baseline.
100%.
Yeah.
So to just simplify it, I'd say this. I think that the Mavericks have had a worse season than the 76ers, although both have had horrific seasons, simply because the Mavericks are going from the NBA Finals with a 25-year-old generational superstar at the top of his game to a team that has no postseason aspirations. The future is beyond murky, if not entirely in doubt. To compare that to the 76ers, who, while they've suffered a somewhat similar fate, some of that was to be expected with the health concerns that have always whirled around Joel Embiid's career.
Yeah. I'm going to preface this by saying I agree with you. But, just to go on a little bit of a rant here. The problem with the Sixers is Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey is the most overrated GM in the league. People talk about him in NBA media like he's some type of genius. He's never won an NBA title. He's more known for basically having all of the superstars that play for him implode in bizarre ways. Everyone who ends up playing for him ends up hating it at the end. He does not know how to build a consistent winner. He does not know how to build around a superstar team. He doesn't understand the value of chemistry. He has destroyed this team. He is solely responsible for the 5-year extension that he gave Joel Embiid. He is solely responsible for the 5-year contract he gave Paul George. He has ruined the Sixers until 2030. This team has no future. And this is all because of one man, Daryl Morey. He is the most overrated person in the NBA.
So does that mean, so the question, I guess, could be, and we don't have to spend a ton of time talking about this because it is sort of retrospective, but could you, based on that, potentially give the crown to the Sixers for the worst season simply because the 5-year deals for Embiid and Paul George, not really tradable, especially not Embiid. At least if the Mavericks wanted to, they could trade Anthony Davis and recoup some assets.
It's hard. Well, one, it's very funny that these two teams traded between each other, and part of the reason we hate on the Mavs is because they gave up Quentin Grimes, who's ended up being a 25-5 player on high efficiency for the Sixers. But I think that what makes me say the Mavs have had a worse offseason is that they mortgaged everything for the now, and then the now imploded on them completely with Kyrie hurting himself. They have no long-term assets of real value. Even AD, I think, is going to bring back limited value. The Sixers
and the Kyrie thing's exacerbated because that's not going to be fully resolved when the season starts next year.
No, and the Sixers at least have Maxey, who's young enough that you can build out for a little bit. But they're both so stuck in such a bad place that it's going to be really tough for I can't see either of these two teams, barring Kyrie making a miraculous recovery and coming back as good as he was before next year, uh, being competitive in the near future. I think Embiid's cooked. I think he's done. Not like I think he's going to play again. I'm not saying that, but he's not going to be an all-star level impactful player ever again in his career. I think Paul George, same thing. I think Paul George is sort of like going to be like a fifth option and like become basically a spot up shooter for the rest of his career. And you've allocated 75% of the NBA salary cap to those two players. Congratulations, great job, guys. And then the rest of your salary cap's taken up by Tyrese Maxey. So you just basically have minimum contracts to fill out 13 roster spots or whatever.
They didn't sign Grimes though, did they? They just traded for him. He's a free agent in the offseason.
He's a free agent, and he may
command a lot of money. He's playing for a contract.
Yeah, I think the max they can offer him is the mid-level. If a team can give him for more mid-level, I don't see why he would want to resign. Because like next year, I think Grimes is going to want out. Because the other thing to remember is that the Sixers have that rookie that was playing well at the beginning of the year, McCain. And like, yes, he's a good young player, but like, why would Grimes want to split?
No, I agree. I mean, like, and if I'm the Sixers, I mean, I wouldn't want to, that's just not a need for me with McCain and Maxey.
No, and but and the Mavs, like the unique thing about the Mavs is like this decision to self-immolate that we've rarely ever seen. Like a lot of time, like the Sixers can honestly say, it's like who could have predicted this? But like they can honestly say injuries are what screwed them over this year. Like that's what they're going to tell you. The Mavs had some injury luck, bad luck, but the moves the reason they're in the mud now is literally all self-inflicted, and they are open about it because they believe they made the right moves. They are the ones who detonated stakes of dynamite in their team. It wasn't like outside forces that had that impacted this, and that's what separates them from any other team. Like I think this is truly the worst offseason we've ever, as you said before, of any professional sports team we've ever seen.
I agree. What's your last thing for us to keep our eye on?
I hate to sort of go back to this one, but I think it has to be OKC to me. What is this a team that we think can keep this up in the playoffs? Because on day to night, yeah. They are. I think that they're going to go in there with a chip on their shoulder, and every metric from like UC puts them as a team that's going to minimum be in the finals. And yet when I watch them play, I keep on coming out with this, like, there's just clear flaws that I don't see being resolved in the playoffs. I don't see how they are able to generate efficient offense in a slowed down, more half court game where like teams like, that you're going to need more than Shea to win. And the times where I've seen them struggle are when the game slows down and you have to ask other players to create their own shot, and they just don't have that.
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
I think you and I would both favor in a play-in game between the Timberwolves and the Clippers, because I don't think the Timberwolves are going to be able to keep pace with the Warriors.
I would take the Timberwolves against the Clippers, yes.
I would take the Timberwolves against the Clippers. But let me ask you this. Kawhi Leonard has a good game. James Harden has a good game. Nowitzki Zubac does what you would expect him to do, play at his level.
Mm-hmm.
Norman Powell plays well. If they play that game 10 times, what's the split?
6-4?
The exact same thing I was thinking, 6-4.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say that the play-in game, which is a winner-take-all one-time game, is one of the four, and the Clippers win. And then you have Timberwolves most certainly against the Mavericks. I'm sorry, against the Kings. Kings would beat the Mavericks or the Suns, I think. So then it would be Timberwolves versus the Kings.
Timberwolves are crushing the Kings.
I take the Timberwolves. Now you have the Thunder playing the Timberwolves in round one.
That's a fun series, man.
And Dallas has traditionally given OKC problems. But that team's no longer in existence. The only other team that you can think of that's consistently given OKC problems is Minnesota.
Yeah, and they have the personnel to do it. I mean, they have the feisty type of personnel to cause problems, and I think like the goal, if I'm playing,
They also have a young, athletic perimeter defender who happens to have known Shea Gilgeous-Alexander for his entire life.
his
And
literal cousin, yeah, like, yeah. No, they have that. And not only that, they have Jaden McDaniels. They can throw on. Like, to me, the key to beating the Thunder is relatively straightforward, and not because it's easy, but because it's not that it's not, but not easy. It's straightforward, but not easy. Which is you make Shea Gilgeous-Alexander be the only one who can score. Let him score 60. Let him go break Michael Jordan's playoff scoring record, but just don't don't foul. Let's and just make him work himself to death and focus on shutting down both Chet and Jalen Williams. And
Naz Reid is the perfect player to put on Chet Holmgren. Either Nickeil Alexander-Walker or McDaniels is the perfect player to put on Jalen Williams. Rudy Gobert standing around the rim, protecting the rim makes it difficult. Julius Randle is not the greatest defender, but he has a strong, sturdy body. Anthony Edwards is an active defender. I think they can easily match OKC's level of intensity. And at the end of the day, the reason I say when we started this segment with you saying, can they keep it up? And I immediately said no.
Yeah.
And I've said it all year, and it goes back to the same thing every time. I think everything you just said is 100% right. We've seen it in the playoffs before. Last year against Dallas, Jalen Williams struggles. Chet Holmgren's turned into a perimeter shooter. Like to me, one of the issues with Chet is you put him out there at the 3-point line, and teams are going to say, okay, well, we're going to put a bigger body that can, honestly, I think you could put a Luka on Chet Holmgren at the 3-point line, and Chet Holmgren's not going to beat him off the dribble, and he's long enough to contest 3-point shots, and Chet's not a good enough 3-point shooter to make a high percentage of these contested shots. And you just sort of relegate him to obscurity whenever you put him in that role, but there's not a lot else you can do with him because Hartenstein and Shea keep that middle compacted.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to do anything else with him. You put a good defender on Jalen Williams and you make him inefficient. I agree with all that. But at the end of the day, the core of it to me with OKC is, can they keep up that level of intensity? And even if they can, will it have the same impact? And the reason I say no so definitively is teams are not game planning for OKC in the regular season anything like they will game plan for OKC in a playoff series.
Yep.
If OKC finds themselves against Denver swarming Jokic is going to pick them apart.
Yes, 100%.
If OKC finds themselves swarming Luka, the floor is suddenly going to shift, and the player you're closing out is no longer PJ Washington in a corner. It's LeBron James. And even if you effectively do that, suddenly the ball swings, and now you're closing out Austin Reeves, another shifty ball handler who can create contact, score at the rim, create for others, shoot the three-pointer. I just think once you implement a game plan to deal with OKC swarming defense, the effects of that defense are going to be relegated. I still think they're going to give you problems of scoring at the rim. I still think all that's going to be true. But I think their ability to get quality mid-range and perimeter shots, swarming players like Luka and Jokic, I just don't think their defense is. I think not only I think their defense is not going to be able to prevent it. I think their defense is going to breed it.
No, that's kind of been my issue all along. I mean, the real problem they have is that, you have Shea's natural inclination, this is the right inclination in this case, is if he sees himself being just guarded by one person, is he just goes to work, try to score. And so you're going to be able to funnel him into that mode relatively straightforward. And I I just don't I think that one, even if they beat the Timberwolves, you're getting a situation where he's going to be banged up, bruised, and tired. But that, and 3-4 rounds of that is not usually a recipe we've seen of success. For someone having to carry that large of an offensive load. And I just see a lot of structural flaws with this. And if the scenario you're talking about plays out, we're going to have very interesting conversations about a team that won nearly, like, if they win 68, 69 games, 67 games, like, that's a hallowed mark in NBA history. There's only like 6 or 7 teams that have gotten that high. And 2 of which are the Bulls. There's the Warriors team. But there's not a lot of examples of that. And if they do that and then somehow flame out in the first round, that's
What's the threshold for that conversation? I mean, if they make the Western Conference Finals, we're not having that conversation because they've progressed from first round to second round to Western Conference Finals in 3 consecutive years. But if they flame out in the second round again, are we having that conversation?
Yeah. I mean, that threshold isn't like great team. That threshold is like all-time great team when you're winning that many games. Like that, you hit that level of wins, you're supposed to win the title. And the only way, like, you're really supposed to like lose titles if there's another team with that level of wins, and that beats you. There's a reason why the 68 win Sonics from 1996 aren't looked at as a bad team. They were beaten by the 72 win Bulls. Like that's no one's going to criticize them for that. But that is just a dramatic underperforming of expectations. Yeah, at that point, that signals inherent roster flaws, absent massive injuries holding you back of some sort, which they do not have at this point.
Yeah, I think worst case scenario for the Thunder would actually be drawing Minnesota in that first round series. I think Minnesota's 11-1 in the last 12 Julius Randle games. But to be clear, I think that OKC faces significant problems at a bare minimum from the start of the second round.
Yeah.
Jokic is going to present them with major matchup issues. I think it's over the last 7 games. Luka's second in the NBA in scoring. The efficiency isn't there yet, but that's coming. And more problematic even is you already see like the fit happen quicker than I think anybody expected it to, and it's just going to get more and more and more intuitive for him and LeBron. I think that's going to be a major problem. So I think right off the bat, you're looking at teams like Minnesota, Denver, Lakers causing major matchup problems. I think when you look at teams like Golden State, like I said earlier, I think Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green's ability to muck up a series could greatly impact OKC's game plan, get them off of their game. The one advantage they have is they have just a cadre of players they can throw at Steph Curry over the course of that series to try to keep everyone fresh. Brian Windhorst, all the NBA media, they're completely sold that OKC is on a level that no other team has reached, and they're the undisputed number 1 favorites heading into the playoffs. But Brian Windhorst will simultaneously report that he is, it is extremely common, both with players, coaching staffs, front offices, that they believe OKC is extremely vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And according to Dallas, strangely, it makes 0 sense, but according to Dallas, that was a huge part of the move that they made. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any sense given the fact that you had the guy that beat them last year. But nevertheless, you made the move. Like, teams do not respect OKC. According to Windhorst, effectively, these teams, players, coaching staffs, front offices agree with you and I that is sort of a paper tiger.
Well, yeah, you just listed. You're only able to play one of 7 teams in the first round. There's only 7 possible opponents in your bracket of your conference in the playoffs. You're telling me 3 of those 7 teams have matchup problems. That's not a recipe for a team making a long playoff run. Like, that's a recipe for, like, the likelihood is you're going to play 2 of those 3, and at least, or even possibly 3 of those 3. And teams don't beat 3 matchup problems in a row. They can beat 1 if they're lucky, but like you don't beat 3 teams who like back to back to back who have advantages against you. It's just not how the NBA has ever worked. And I think and the teams that like you would say they wouldn't have matchup advantages against them. Like I think they beat Houston pretty easily, but like Memphis is not.
I would agree with that.
That Memphis is not an easy series. That's a pretty hard fight. Memphis is kind of like Memphis is a little bit of a clone quality to them. They're they're like the Costco version, and sort of like in terms of like they have players who play the similar positions and roles.
As OKC,
if albeit different roles and how they're split out. But I don't think that I don't think the Clippers. I think they beat the Clippers, but the Clippers is a tough sort of a slog of a series, and it's.
I think it really depends too with the Clippers. Like, what are you getting out of Kawhi Leonard? Like, because the truth about Kawhi Leonard is he's kind of like LeBron James, in that he does have to kind of pick his spots.
Yeah.
But like once you get in the playoffs, it's not going to be about picking your spots anymore. It's just going to be about going. And Kawhi Leonard, like LeBron James, is one of those players that. I mean, he could be the best player in a series.
Yeah, and he's not someone that physicality has ever bothered. Put it that way.
He's also like LeBron James. If we're going to play a physical game, this is going to favor him.
Yeah, I can just shoot through you. Man, it's the biggest chest in the NBA. But they don't. I think the playoffs. I would be surprised. Maybe I'll have to eat my hat when I say this, but like that, if they mow down the playoffs like we've seen now, I would be very surprised. I think that they're going to have a tough slog every round, and there's a possibility, even if that's kind of shocking, that they get ousted in the first round and then the whole playoffs are thrown up in the air. Quite honestly,
I think if they draw Minnesota, I will be glued to my TV in round 1. For every one of those games, and I think that that's going to be. I think you're looking at, a 7-game series.
Yeah,
right
I think
the gate.
Yeah, the only easy matchups for them are Houston and Phoenix, or whatever version of
or if somehow the Kings got there or something.
Yeah, like they'll dispatch them with.
And I don't think. I agree with you. The Clippers are not an easy series. They're going to beat the Clippers. Yeah. It's just a matter. I would almost expect it to look like, kind of like the Mavericks Clippers series last year. Now the difference is, this Clippers team has the potential. Like going into it, the season, we would have been like, well, they got James Harden and theoretically Kawhi Leonard, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we wouldn't even mention Norman Powell. But it turns out Norman Powell is an all-star level player.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about James Harden and Kawhi Leonard with Norman Powell. You're talking about Zubac, who, quite frankly, is probably the best true 5 in that series. And you're talking about Derek Jones Jr., who has played and beat OKC in a playoff series, knows exactly what's expected of him. And there was a lot of talk last year about how the Mavericks got lucky because they got a lot of what people wanted to call sort of outlier shooting from players like Derek Jones Jr. But then the truth is, this year from 3, Derek Jones Jr. is shooting 36%.
Yeah.
So you can expect the same high-level athleticism, tough perimeter defense. He matched up fairly well with Shea, and 36% shooting from the corner. And so I think they're not going to be an easy out. I would take OKC over the Clippers, but they would not be an easy out.
No, they'll peel some games off of them. They have. We really haven't seen it all this year because they've sort of all been injured different times, mostly Kawhi. But like the weakness of the Clippers this year has been their offense. It's just been a slog because they've often just sort of like they were missing, but like they at their peak they have three high level efficient 20 points a game scorers
Yeah.
with a fourth option in Zubac who can do some stuff. They have some other players who can chip in here and there, including Bogdanovich. They got
Yeah, that was a good pickup.
yeah, and they got veterans who could just eat minutes. They got Batum, they
Yeah.
got what's his name, their backup guard who's the defensive shutdown. They have some good players, and so like they'll be able to peel off a couple of games. They don't have enough to win the series, I don't think. And
Yeah. Well, and more importantly, I think if they draw the Clippers, what OKC fans would have to be mindful of is that I agree with you. Like you're going to end up being in a tough, gritty series where they're going to take a few games off of you. More importantly, you're also dealing with two coaches in Tyronn Lue and Van Gundy that are going to scheme and try to figure out what they can do to stop you. And you could end up seeing a situation like you saw with the Timberwolves last year, where Malone and the Denver Nuggets, in an effort to try to figure out how to stop Minnesota, finally figured out, putting up that wall to take away driving lanes for Edwards, just completely shut down their offense. But it was too late.
Yeah, another team had the personnel to carry it out.
The Mavs end up picking up that playbook in the next round and leaning on it, and it carries them through Minnesota handedly. You could very well end up seeing the Clippers figure out a strategy to slow down Shea or Chet or Jalen Williams or something like that, and them not having the personnel to actually win the series. But then the next team up just inherits that playbook and executes it and wins as a result.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right. Well, that's the 5 big things that we got our eye on heading into the playoffs. Once again, please like, subscribe, follow us on YouTube. We're going to be covering your favorite teams throughout the playoffs. We're going to be covering all the major storylines throughout the playoffs. We assure you one of those storylines will be OKC getting put out. We don't know which round yet, but we'll be here to talk about it when it happens. And until next time, take care.
Peace.